Hey guys, my name is Boris and I'm a computer engineering and computer science student at the Technical University of Berlin. And on this channel, I want to talk about things that I've learned and might bring you value, general educational topics, and lifestyle ones. Today, I'm going to talk about the 7 most important skills, mindsets, and techniques that I've learned as a student. Now, I won't cover the actual content of my program that I've learned, but rather the things that are generally applicable to your life and also studying. So let's start right away with the most important point, which might be a bit bold. And this point is that nothing is actually that hard. Well, of course, some things are more difficult than others, but nothing is really impossible. I mean, you could ask yourself the question, if other students could do that, why shouldn't I be able to do it as well? They had a similar entry point as you, and they understood the topic. Now, the point I want to convey with the statement is not to pull yourself down because you think that you are not that intelligent as other students, but to understand that every complex problem can be broken down in simpler terms and can be explained a lot simpler. I mean, Einstein, for example, once said something like, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you haven't understood it yourself. Now, the important thing is not to just be able to recite this and say it out loud to other people, but to really internalize it. And once you have really understood this concept, then you'll have a huge click moment and your studying will be much more efficient and much more fun. And this is also applicable to problems in everyday life that might seem daunting at the beginning. Of course, there are limits to this, but generally speaking, you can definitely view hard problems as not so hard. You just have to understand the simple way of explaining it or breaking it down into a simpler way. Now, the next point on my list builds up quite well on top of the first point, and it is that everything is Googleable. Google is your very best friend. From just Googling the error message your compiler throws at you, or Googling how to implement a certain logic in a programming language like Python, or just Googling synonyms for words that you want to use multiple times in an essay or in a paper. Google will help you out pretty well in such situations, but it can do a lot more. You can almost learn everything on the internet. But it's not only useful for things that you have to Google for your uni or learning, but also for everyday life. I think it's very interesting if you pay attention to your friends and family, how often they will start a discussion over things that they don't know or just ask a question, and then they will try and get a solution and eventually just give up. But in the end, this question can be Googled very simply. It's just not a default option for those people who are not really used to working with Google that much. In fact, it's not only not a default option, but they really don't think of it or just don't think of it that quickly. Anyway, being able to work with Google is very important and you won't be able to avoid it in your workflow as a computer scientist or computer engineer. Speaking of workflow, the next point is you learn how to manage time. But not only how to allocate a lot of your time to studying, but how to efficiently manage your time. So that means how to attack problems in a systematic way. You will definitely still have a lot to do as a computer engineering or computer science student, but with a bit of good time management and how to efficiently study, remember the first point, you will have a much better time. It can be as simple as just having a checklist of things you have to do, or then even using something like time blocking where you assign a certain task to a certain time block. Because in the end, if you tell yourself that in the course of this day I will finish this and this and this, well, joke's on you, you will probably not be able to do that. Now, this doesn't mean I want you to be like in a toxic productivity flow, and I don't want you to relax, rather the opposite. I want you to efficiently use your time where you are working and then have more time for actual relaxation. I mean, sitting in front of your screen and doing some work, then scrolling through Instagram isn't that relaxing because you know that you have to be doing work but are only just procrastinating. In my opinion, it is better to first finish your work and then eventually do the same thing as scrolling through Instagram, but actually being able to relax by doing that while sitting on the couch or in bed or doing just something else. Again, it's really just simple things that you might want to include into your workflow, like doing this bullet point list of things that you have to do. It might not seem substantial, but it goes a long way. Now, talking about a lot of work, my next point is that you will learn how to deal with stress. Working on a problem for several hours and not getting anywhere is quite stressful, but in the end it does actually work. I mean, all this time management doesn't mean that you will be able to rush through your code without any bugs. You will definitely still have stressful situations, especially in the beginning where you haven't found the right techniques for yourself. As annoying and just unpleasant such stressful situations are, you will learn from them and just have the skill of dealing with those situations. I mean, in future there will definitely also be difficult situations, but you will have the experience in handling them, whilst others might be a bit stressed out and start crying or just not knowing how to deal with it. You will then hopefully be a bit more relaxed and able to handle the situation like a grown-up person, as some would say, and you would be able to help out. Of course, this would be a pretty optimal scenario if you are a tough guy or girl, but it's undeniably a very important skill that you have to learn sooner or later. So my next point is that every mythical professor or supervisor or even reviewer for a paper are normal human beings. And this is another point that when you really realize it, you will be less scared, and effectively this will reduce anxiety and stress. Of course, there are still exceptions where people are just mean human beings or actually think they are some sort of god, but in most cases they are actually really nice and kind human beings. And most of them will still be impressed by fairly simple things. I mean, reviewer for a conference, for example, will be impressed by visually appealing graphs that you use, or when you have experiments and videos for those, if those videos are of high quality or well produced and just the setup that you use is clean and cool. It's impressive. Again, the actual content of your work is still very important, but those things on top are often overlooked, and if you are on the edge of failing or succeeding, those things might be the turning point. Continuing, when talking to professors, almost all, especially of the younger generation, are actually very kind people. Respect is definitely still necessary, but you can allow yourself to laugh with them or be euphoric. In fact, showing how happy you are or just happy to be able to work with them will make them happy as well. Not to mention talking to tutors who are literally other students just a few semesters above you. But again, all of this translates really well to job interviews or just talking to others in general. Now, this doesn't mean that you should go crazy right away. You should be a bit cautious in the beginning to see where the limits are, but keep that in the back of your mind so you won't be that anxious. In the end, they are just normal human beings, and if you keep that in mind, you will be more confident, give off a better impression of yourself, and just look like a person that they want to work with. Now, next is point 6, which builds up on the previous one, and this is that it's really about the people. If you are surrounded by just good and motivated people, they will take you along the ride and boost you. Now, I have read one philosophy book, but there was one quote that I really liked, which is from Epictetus. He once said, "Place an extinguished piece of coal next to a live one, and either it will cause the other one to die out, or the live one will make the other reignite." I made a video where I talk about how to prepare for uni, which you can click up in the info card, but I mentioned there as well that it is really important to find a friend or someone to study with that is as motivated as you are. They can not only help you understand things that you don't, but you can engage in discussions and talk about problems, and effectively you will explain him things, he will explain to you things, and you will both gain knowledge from that. Generally speaking, you shouldn't be the single best one in your group, because you could do more and thrive more perhaps in another environment. But you shouldn't also be the worst one, because you probably can't catch up. But if you had to choose one of those two options, I would definitely go for the latter and try hard. This is also applicable later at work or when working on own projects or even a startup. If you're not working with someone that is on your level of dedication and motivation, you really are set for failure. Now, at work as an employee, it's a bit harder and it depends on your manager and your group, but still, if you have a good group, you can also learn a lot at work. Again, this is probably easier said than done, especially when you get to post-uni life, but in uni it really is important to keep in mind, and after uni it still is important and you will gain a lot of benefits from that. Even when you are looking for friends and think of groups that you want to hang out with. Now, the last point might be an abrupt change, but it is that the Pomodoro technique is actually pretty sick. Not only for studying, but any kind of deep work or even just labor-intensive work. Now, if you don't know what Pomodoro is, it's simply the name for the technique of having strict periods of studying and then resting. It is based on actual research, and it says that after 25 minutes, your focus drops exponentially, and with a 5-minute break, it resets to a good level. I personally feel like 25 minutes is a bit too short, and at 25 minutes I'm pretty good in the flow, so my favorite timer would be 50 minutes on or 50 minutes of studying and 10 minutes of a resting time. And I actually have one study with me video where I do this 50-10 period. The most difficult part is just to getting started, but once you have started and are in the flow, 12 hours Pomodoro timer and you're just set for the day. And this means that before you really get starting with your session, you should make a list, remember the time management point, and write down what you have to do. So eventually you just have to sit down, look at your list and get going. Ideally, you could write this list even the night before you want to go into your deep Pomodoro session. But really, this technique is applicable for so many more things than just studying. Having a long coding session before you, use Pomodoro. Need to write a long essay for a few hours, Pomodoro is quite well for that as well. But even for chores where you have to just vacuum your apartment or clean the kitchen or toilet or whatever, you can just activate your Pomodoro timer and you'll have a better time, I think. And those were my 7 most significant skills, mindsets, and techniques that I've learned as a computer engineering/computer science student. Now, if you want to know what the actual difference between computer engineering and computer science is, I will eventually link up a video right here that you'll be able to click. Now, I hope you have found this video entertaining, but most importantly, learned a few new things. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and tell me which point you think is the most important one, or which one you would want to add to this list. Now, again, in my opinion, the first point is a huge deal. And with that said, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!